The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the air conditioning humming somewhere above my head. Judge Patricia Holloway had been on the bench for over 20 years. I'd done my research. She was known for two things: an iron jaw and zero patience for nonsense. In all her years presiding over Fulton County Family Court, the attorneys who practiced there said they had never not once seen her laugh during a proceeding. Until that Tuesday morning in October. She picked up the printed page, read it, and then right there in open court in front of everyone, she pressed her lips together, looked up at my husband, and let out a single genuine laugh. Derrick Lamont Booker stood at that defense table in his custom Navy suit, and for the first time in 9 years of marriage, he had absolutely nothing to say. My name is Camille Renee Booker. I am 38 years old. I'm a forensic accountant from Atlanta, Georgia. And the man who thought he had set the perfect trap had no idea he was already standing inside mine. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who's up with me for this one. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and stay close because trust me, you are going to want to hear every single second of this story. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Let me tell you about the woman I was before all of this. I grew up in southwest Atlanta off Cascade Road in a 3-bedroom house that my grandmother owned outright. My mother worked as a medical billing specialist. My father was in and out, mostly out, and by the time I was 9 years old, he was gone for good. I watched my mother sit at the kitchen table one night with a stack of bills and a calculator, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, and I remember thinking I want to understand numbers the way she does. I want to be the person who always knows exactly where things stand. That thought became my whole life. I graduated from Spelman College with a degree in accounting, got my CPA license at 24. By 27, I had been recruited by Meridian Financial Consulting, one of the top forensic accounting firms in Atlanta, where I specialized in fraud investigation. What that means for those who don't know is that I spent my days hunting liars. I followed paper trails. I found the money people tried to hide. I reconstructed financial histories that companies and individuals swore didn't exist. I was very, very good at my job. The irony of all of this is not lost on me. Not even a little bit. By the time I turned 32, I had a corner office on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown, a 2,200 square foot house in Buckhead that I had put the down payment on myself, and a reputation in my industry that I had built one case at a time. I didn't come from money. I built everything I had with my own 2 hands, my own brain, and a whole lot of early mornings. And then there was Derrick. Derrick Lamont Booker walked into my life at a charity gala for the Atlanta Urban League on a Saturday evening in the fall of 2013. He was 41, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy confidence that fills a room without demanding it. He developed mid-range residential properties across the metro Atlanta area. Townhomes, mixed-use developments, the kind of projects that showed up in Atlanta Business Chronicle features with his name attached. He was charming in the way that made you feel like the most interesting person in the room when he looked at you. And Lord, did he know how to look at you. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I took my time. I asked questions. I met his mother, Diane, a retired school teacher from Decatur, who brought sweet potato pie to every family gathering and called me baby girl from the second Sunday we met. She seemed warm. She seemed genuine. She seemed like the kind of mother-in-law women prayed for. We married in the spring of 2016 at a small ceremony at Piedmont Park. 40 guests, white garden roses, the Atlanta skyline in the background. Tasha Monroe, my best friend since freshman year at Spelman, now one of the sharpest family law attorneys in the city, stood beside me as my maid of honor. I remember her leaning over right before I walked out and whispering,
"You look stunning. You deserve every good thing."
I believed her completely. The early years were good. I want to be honest about that because some people assume that when a marriage goes wrong, it was never right to begin with. That wasn't true for us. We had real moments. Sunday mornings on the back porch with coffee and the newspaper. Spontaneous weekend drives down to Savannah just because neither of us had plans. Derrick could make me laugh harder than almost anyone I knew. He remembered small things, the way I liked my tea, the exact spot on my shoulders, where tension collected after a long week, the names of every person I ever mentioned from work. He was attentive in the way that makes you feel seen, chosen, safe. I was good at my job, but I was not immune to that feeling. No one is. Our finances were structured clearly. We each maintained individual accounts and contributed equally to a joint account for household expenses. My income was steady and significant. Derrick's was more variable, dependent on deals, closing projects, moving forward. There were lean quarters and there were flush ones. I never made him feel small about the difference. I had watched my mother navigate financial instability alone, and I had promised myself that if I ever had a partner, I would be a partner in every sense of the word. Looking back now, I understand that he mistook my generosity for blindness. Now let me tell you about Tasha because she matters to everything that comes next. Tasha Monroe is 5 feet 4 inches of absolute precision. She does not waste words. She does not soften things unnecessarily. She's been telling me the truth about my life since we were 18 years old, eating dining hall food and complaining about calculus. When I started dating Derrick, she was supportive but measured. She liked him well enough. But there was always something in the way she watched him, a stillness, a calculation that I filed away and chose not to examine too closely.
I just think you should always know where your money is, Camille.
She said to me once about 3 years into the marriage.
That's all I'm saying.
I told her she was being paranoid. She dropped it. She never brought it up again, but she remembered. I also want to tell you about Marcus Webb because he matters too. Marcus was a senior IT security analyst at Meridian Quiet Methodical, the kind of person who could find a corrupted file in a system of 10,000 documents and never once raise his voice about it. We had lunch together most Thursdays, usually at a small Jamaican spot on Peachtree that neither of us ever got tired of. He was one of those rare colleagues who felt like actual family, no agenda, no office politics, just a genuinely good person. I did not know in those early years how much I would need both of them. The first sign that something had shifted came on a Friday evening in late February, about 18 months before everything unraveled. I came home from work a little early. A deposition had wrapped up ahead of schedule, and Derrick's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for a Friday. When I walked inside, he was on the phone in the kitchen. He saw me come through the door and something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly. Something more like recalibration. He wrapped up the call within 30 seconds.
"Hey, baby,"
he said and kissed my cheek.
"Didn't expect you home early."
"Who was that?" I asked, setting my bag down.
"Marcus,"
he said without missing a beat.
"My business partner Marcus, about the West Side project."
It was such a small thing, such a completely forgettable exchange, except that Derrick's business partner was named David, not Marcus. And I had never in 5 years of marriage heard him refer to anyone named Marcus in connection with his work. I didn't say anything. I went to the bedroom, changed out of my work clothes, and started thinking about what to make for dinner. I told myself it was nothing. A slip of the tongue. A misremembered name. But here is the thing about spending your career catching liars. You develop a sensitivity to the small things. The micro adjustments. The fraction of a second pauses before an answer arrives. I felt that pause. I cataloged it. And somewhere in the back of my mind, in the part that runs the calculations, I'm not always conscious of a process, quietly began. I was so good at waiting. Let me tell you about the last truly happy night I remember. It was a Saturday in early April, about 14 months before the divorce filing. Derrick had surprised me with a weekend trip down to Savannah, just the two of us. No phones after 7 in the evening, the way we used to do before his business started consuming every hour of his attention. We stayed at a small inn on Jones Street, the kind of place with creaky hardwood floors and ceiling fans, and a porch that looked out over Spanish moss, hanging from oak trees older than the city itself. We ate shrimp and grits at a restaurant on the river. We walked along the waterfront after midnight, the air thick and warm and smelling like salt and something green. Derrick held my hand the way he used to in the beginning, not performatively, not out of habit, but deliberately. Like he meant it.
"You know what I love about you?"
he said, stopping on the bridge, looking out at the water. "Tell me," I said.
"You never panic. No matter what's happening, you go quiet and you figure it out. I've never met another person like that."
I leaned into him and thought, this is enough. This is exactly enough. I have replayed that night many times since then. I have wondered whether he meant any of it. I have come to believe that in that specific moment standing on that bridge in Savannah, he probably did. That is almost worse than if he hadn't. We drove back to Atlanta on Sunday afternoon. By Tuesday, the distance was back. The second sign came about 3 weeks after the kitchen phone incident. I noticed the name Vanessa P. appearing in Derrick's call history, not because I was searching for it, but because his phone was sitting face up on the kitchen counter when a call came in, and I saw the name before he swept the phone off the counter and into his pocket in one smooth motion. Who's Vanessa? I asked the same easy tone I use when I am gathering information without signaling that I am gathering information. A professional habit.
New partner on the West Side project?
He said, not looking up from the refrigerator.
Commercial real estate attorney. Brings a lot of investors to the table.
It was plausible. It was entirely plausible. That was the thing about Derrick. His lies always had architecture. They had supporting details and reasonable explanations, and just enough truth woven through them to hold their shape under casual inspection. I nodded and let it go. But I noticed that Vanessa P. called on Tuesday and Thursday evenings consistently between 7 and 9 at night. I noticed that Derrick began taking those calls in the garage with the door pulled shut. I noticed that when he came back inside, he was always slightly more animated, looser, lighter, in a way that had nothing to do with discussing construction timelines. I noticed. I filed it. I said nothing. Then came the dinner at Diane's house. This is the part I need you to really hear, because this was the first time I understood that something had fundamentally changed, not just between me and Derrick, but in the dynamic of that entire family. It was a Sunday in late April. Diane had cooked her full spread, the kind she reserved for celebrations: baked chicken collard greens, macaroni and cheese cornbread, the sweet potato pie that had once felt like a gesture of love and now felt like a prop. There were 8 of us at the table: Diane, Derrick's younger brother, Calvin, and his wife, 2 of Derrick's cousins, and a couple who were longtime family friends, the Hendersons, who had known Derrick since he was in high school. Mr. Henderson asked about my work. I had just concluded a major fraud case. I can't name the client, but it had been covered in the Atlanta Business Chronicle and had been one of the most technically complex investigations our firm had ever handled. I was proud of it. I started explaining the methodology, how we had reconstructed 5 years of falsified financial records using metadata analysis and third-party transaction data. I had barely gotten through 2 sentences when Derrick cut me off. Not subtly, not gently. He just talked over me, pivoting the conversation to one of his own development projects, laughing as he did it the way you laugh when you're signaling to a room that what just happened was not worth acknowledging.
You'll have to excuse my wife,
he said with that easy smile that the Hendersons and Calvin's wife and everyone at that table clearly found charming.
She starts talking numbers and she forgets the rest of us didn't go to accounting school. Nobody asked for your analysis, Camille. Let the adults talk.
He said it like a joke. He delivered it with a grin. Calvin laughed. Mr. Henderson chuckled politely. Diane looked down at her plate and said nothing. The table moved on within 4 seconds. I sat there with my fork in my hand and my face completely still, the way I have trained myself to be still, and I felt something shift inside me. Not break, not shatter, shift. Like a weight moving from one side of a scale to the other. I looked at Diane. She was still looking at her plate. She knew. I understood in that moment with complete clarity. She knew something was happening and she had chosen her position, and it was not mine. On the drive home, Derrick reached over and patted my knee.
Sorry if that came out wrong,
he said with the tone of a man who does not believe he needs to apologize, but has calculated that offering one is efficient.
You know, I'm just playing.
I know, I said. I looked out the window at the highway lights, and I thought about what Tasha had told me 3 years earlier. Always know where your money is, Camille. I called her the next morning from my office door closed.
Tasha,
I said.
I need you to walk me through something. Hypothetically.
She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds.
Okay. Tell me what you're seeing.
That was the beginning. Not of the end had already begun, without my permission. This was the beginning of me deciding to pay attention. 2 weeks after that dinner, I was looking through the filing cabinet in our home office for our auto insurance renewal documents, when my hand landed on something that didn't belong. A folded receipt tucked inside a folder labeled Home Warranties. I unfolded it. It was an itemized hotel bill from the W Atlanta Midtown. 2 nights the previous month. Room service for 2. A bottle of wine at $94. A late checkout fee. My name was not on it. Only Derrick's credit card. My hands went cold. Not shaky cold. Cold like marble. I stood in that office for a long moment looking at that receipt. Then I took out my phone, photographed both sides of it, folded it exactly as I had found it, and placed it back in the folder in the precise position where I had found it. I closed the cabinet. I went to the kitchen. I started making dinner. And somewhere beneath the absolute stillness of my face, the process that had started weeks ago shifted into a different gear entirely. 3 weeks later, I found something I couldn't explain away. And this time I didn't try. Let me tell you what it feels like to be a forensic accountant who suspects her own husband. It feels like standing inside a case file. It feels like the professional part of your brain clicking on, automatically running its processes, cataloging data points, while the personal part of you stands slightly behind it, watching, hoping the analysis comes back clean, hoping you misread the evidence, hoping the numbers don't add up the way they appear to be adding up. They always add up. The hotel receipt was the first hard document. But I had been collecting soft evidence for weeks before that the pattern of Tuesday and Thursday calls the garage door pulled shut the name Vanessa P., the microsecond recalibration on Derrick's face the evening I came home early. None of it was conclusive on its own. All of it was directional. I did what I do. I built a timeline. On a Thursday afternoon, I told Marcus over lunch that I needed a favor personal, completely outside work, and something I would never ask if I had any other option. Marcus set down his fork and looked at me for a moment.
Whatever you need, Camille. Just tell me.
I asked him to help me pull publicly available property and business filings associated with Derrick's company, Booker Development Group. Nothing illegal. Nothing that required access to private systems. Just the kind of documentation that sits in county records and state business registries waiting for someone who knows how to read it. What Marcus found over the following week was this. Booker Development Group had 3 active projects listed with Fulton County. 2 of them had liens filed against them, contractor disputes, unpaid subcontractors. The 3rd project had been quietly transferred to a new LLC registered 4 months prior. The registered agent for that new LLC was listed as Vanessa Pritchard. I sat with that information for 48 hours before I said anything to anyone. Then I confronted Derrick. I want to be clear about how I did this because it matters. I did not come at him with documents spread across the kitchen table. I did not raise my voice. I did not give him the full measure of what I knew because that is not how you conduct an interrogation. You ask the question you already know the answer to and you watch what the person does with it. We were in the living room on a Sunday evening. He was watching a game. I sat down across from him, waited for a commercial, and said, Derrick, I came across a business filing this week. Booker Development has a new LLC with a Vanessa Pritchard listed as registered agent. Can you walk me through why that structure makes sense? He muted the television. The pause before his answer was 1.5 seconds. I counted.
She's a partner on the West Side project. We restructured for liability reasons. Standard practice.
Who advised the restructure?
Our attorney.
Which attorney? I'd like to review the documentation. And that was when his face changed. Not dramatically, Derrick was too controlled for dramatic. But the warmth drained out of it, replaced by something flat and slightly hard, and he said the words that I have thought about every single day since.
You're a numbers girl, Camille. You don't understand how real business works.
He said it with the same easy dismissiveness he had used at Diane's dinner table. Like I was a child asking about something beyond my comprehension. Like 11 years of catching financial fraudsters had given me no applicable insight into what I was looking at. I held his gaze. You're probably right, I said. I'll drop it. He unmuted the television. I went to the bedroom, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands folded in my lap. He had just told me in the flattest possible terms that I was not intelligent enough to understand his business, that my professional expertise, the thing I had spent my entire adult life building, was irrelevant when applied to his affairs, that I should accept his explanation and ask no further questions. I recorded that conversation on my phone. The following week, I called Tasha. Full disclosure this time, the hotel receipt, the business filings, the LLC, the conversation. Tasha listened without interrupting, which for Tasha is significant. When I finished, she said,
Camille, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not move any money. Do not change any passwords. Do not let him know what you know. Are you hearing me?
I hear you, I said.
Document everything. Dates times what was said. Keep copies off your home network. And Camille...
She paused.
Get a second phone.
I told her I thought she might be overreacting.
I hope I am,
she said. She was not overreacting. That Saturday, I noticed my phone behaving strangely. The battery, which normally held through a full day, easily was draining by early afternoon. The screen was activating at odd intervals in the middle of the night. I saw it light up on my nightstand at 2:47 in the morning, then go dark again without any notification appearing. The phone felt warm even when I hadn't been using it. I knew those signs. I had seen them before in cases and depositions in the forensic reports I reviewed as part of financial fraud investigations that crossed into personal surveillance. I knew exactly what those signs indicated, but I needed confirmation before I acted on it. On Thursday, I brought my phone to lunch with Marcus and slid it across the table to him. I need you to look at this, I said. Tell me what you see. Marcus picked it up. He didn't ask questions yet. He just began navigating through the system settings with the practiced efficiency of someone who speaks the language of devices, the way I speak the language of spreadsheets. He was quiet for about 4 minutes. Then he set the phone face down on the table and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before.
Camille,
he said carefully,
there is a commercial spyware application running in the background of this phone. It's accessing your microphone, your location, your messages, and your call logs. It's been there for...
He checked something on the screen.
Based on the installation signature, I'd estimate at least 2 months. Maybe longer.
The restaurant noise continued around us. Someone at a nearby table laughed at something. A soca song played low through the speakers. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip. Can you tell when it was installed? I asked.
Within a week, either side of 8 weeks ago,
he said. 8 weeks ago, Derrick had borrowed my phone for 20 minutes while his was charging because he said he needed to look something up. I had handed it to him without a second thought. I set my water glass down precisely in the center of its condensation ring. Don't remove it, I said. Marcus stared at me.
Camille?
Do not remove it, I repeated. I need to think about this. He nodded slowly. He trusted me. He always trusted me. I paid for lunch. I walked back to my car. I sat in the parking deck on the 3rd level with the engine off for 11 minutes, looking at the concrete wall in front of me. My husband had been listening to my conversations for 2 months, reading my messages, tracking my location. Everything I had said to Tasha, every search I had quietly conducted, every quiet moment of doubt I had expressed to anyone he had seen, all of it. And he still thought he was ahead of me. I drove back to the office. I sat down at my desk. I opened a new document and typed 1 sentence at the top of a blank page. He thinks he knows everything I'm doing. Then I typed the next sentence. Good. Let me tell you what it feels like to perform your own life for an audience you cannot acknowledge. Every morning for the next 3 weeks, I woke up next to Derrick Lamont Booker and I made a choice. I chose what to say out loud. I chose what to text from that phone. I chose what to search, what to worry about, what to reveal, and what to keep in a completely separate compartment that he would never find because it lived entirely inside my own head. I became in the most literal sense a woman playing a role in her own home. Marcus had helped me set up a second phone, a basic prepaid device that I kept at the office, locked in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. All real communication with Tasha went through that phone. All research, all documentation, all the quiet forensic work I was doing after hours, none of it touched the device Derrick was monitoring. On the compromised phone, I was careful to seem exactly like the woman he expected me to be. Slightly unsettled. Occasionally venting to a college friend about stress at work. Googling things like how to save a struggling marriage and communication tips for couples. Things that would read to whoever was monitoring me like a woman who suspected something was wrong, but was trying to hold her marriage together rather than dismantle it. Let him read that. Let him feel secure. Meanwhile, I was building a case that would have held up in any courtroom I had ever worked in. But before I get to what I found, I need to tell you about the phone call. Because this is the thing that changed the molecular composition of my anger. This is the moment I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling something colder and far more useful. It was a Wednesday evening. Derrick was in the backyard on his phone the way he had been doing more and more frequently outside, far enough from the windows that he must have felt confident. What he didn't account for was that our neighbor, Miss Paulette, had asked me to water her plants while she was visiting her sister in Charlotte, and I had stepped out through the side gate into her yard, which backed up against the far corner of ours. I heard his voice clearly, low, unhurried, intimate, in the way that voices become when they are speaking to someone they are completely comfortable with.
She's not going anywhere. You know how she is. She's going to analyze everything to death and then convince herself it's fine. That's what she does.
A pause. Then a laugh, quiet, private, the laugh of a man who feels completely safe.
Now, Vanessa, listen. She's convenient. She's stable. But she's not someone you choose. You know what I'm saying. She's someone you settle for.
I stood in Miss Paulette's yard between two potted ferns and a wind chime, and I felt those words land in my chest like something with weight and temperature. She's someone you settle for. 9 years. The down payment on that house came from my savings. The lien quarters, when his deals fell through, I had covered us both without a word, without making him feel small, because I had promised myself I would be a real partner. I had built a life around this man with the same precision and care that I brought to every case I had ever worked. And he told his girlfriend that I was someone he settled for. I went back inside through the front door. I set Miss Paulette's watering can in the hall closet. I went to the kitchen and started washing dishes. My face was completely still. But something had locked into place inside me that would not move again. The following week, Diane called. I want you to understand what Diane's call represented because it was not a small thing. Diane Booker had sat at my table for 9 Thanksgivings. She had called me baby girl and asked about my work cases and told me I was the daughter she always wanted. Whatever she actually felt I had believed, genuinely believed that she cared about me as a person. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was between meetings. Her voice was warm in the practiced way that I now recognized as performance. "Camille, baby," she said. "I'm just calling because I'm worried about you. Derrick says you've been under a lot of strain lately, and sometimes when we're stressed, we can misread situations. Start seeing problems that maybe aren't quite as serious as they seem." I kept my voice completely neutral. "What kind of problems are you referring to, Diane?" I asked. A small pause. "He just mentioned that you've been asking a lot of questions about the business, checking up on things. And I just want to say a man needs to feel trusted by his wife, especially when he's working hard to build something for your future together." I almost laughed. I did not laugh. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said. "I'll keep that in mind." 2 days later, my mother called me from her home in College Park, her voice tight in the way it gets when she's trying to hold something careful. "Camille, I got a call from Diane Booker yesterday." I closed my office door and sat down. Diane had told my mother that she was concerned about my mental and emotional state, that Derrick had confided in her that I had become paranoid and accusatory, that she felt as an older woman with experience in these matters that perhaps I needed to speak with someone professionally. My mother, to her enormous credit, had listened politely and then called me directly. She did not take sides. She just told me what had been said and asked me plainly, "What's going on, baby?" "Mamas," I said. "I need you to trust me for just a little while longer. I am handling something. When it's done, I will tell you everything. Can you do that for me?" She was quiet for a moment. "You sound like yourself." "Not like someone who's falling apart." "I am very much myself," I said. "Then I trust you," she said. And that was that. But I want you to feel what that cost me. Diane had reached across the boundary of my marriage and contaminated my relationship with my own mother. She had planted a seed of doubt in the one place I had always been safe. She had done it deliberately and strategically. And when I understood that this was coordinated, that Derrick and his mother were working this from multiple angles, simultaneously, something inside me went very, very quiet. Not sad quiet, not hurt quiet, dangerous quiet. That same week, I tried to access our joint financial accounts through the online portal. My login credentials had been changed. I tried the backup email changed as well. I called the bank and was informed that Derrick had updated the account access protocols and that any changes to joint account access would require both parties to appear in person. He had locked me out of our own money. I called Tasha on the prepaid phone that night.
"He locked me out of the joint accounts,"
I said.
"I know,"
she said.
"which means he's moving faster than we thought. Camille, we need to accelerate. I'm filing a motion to freeze marital assets first thing Monday morning."
"Do it," I said. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, the real one, not the one I left visible near the compromised phone, and I wrote his name at the top of the page. Then I drew a line underneath it. Then I started writing everything I knew, everything I had documented, and everything I still needed to find. The list took up 3 full pages. That night, I lay in the dark next to Derrick Lamont Booker, and I listened to him breathe, and I thought about something one of my mentors told me early in my career. She said the most dangerous moment in any fraud investigation is when the subject believes they have already won. That is when they get sloppy. That is when they start making mistakes they cannot take back. I smiled at the ceiling. Let him enjoy his last few days of feeling powerful. Let me tell you about the night I found everything. It was a Thursday in late June, 11 at night. Derrick was in Charlotte for what he described as a 2-day site visit for a potential acquisition. I had nodded when he told me, kissed his cheek at the door, and watched his car back out of the driveway with the same composed expression I had been wearing for weeks. The moment his taillights disappeared around the corner, I went to the home office. We shared a laptop, a household machine we both used for personal tasks separate from our work computers. Derrick used it casually, the way people use devices they don't consider vulnerable. He had a personal email account linked to the browser's autofill. His password manager had been set to remember credentials across sessions. He had told me once early in our marriage that he used the same base password for everything personal, just varied the endings. I had told him that was a significant security risk. He had laughed and said I worried too much. I opened the browser. I navigated to his personal email. The autofill populated the address. I typed the base password I remembered from a conversation years ago, added the number variation I had seen him use on a shared streaming account, and pressed enter. The inbox opened. I want to pause here and tell you that I sat in front of that screen for a full 30 seconds without reading anything. Just looking at the loaded inbox the way you look at a door, you know you cannot unopen once you walk through it. Then I started reading. The thread between Derrick and Vanessa Pritchard went back 14 months. 14 months of emails that told a story I had suspected in outline but had not yet seen in full detail. The relationship was not new. It was not a recent lapse or a moment of weakness. It was a constructed parallel life maintained with the same deliberate architecture that Derrick brought to his development projects. But that was not the worst of it. That was not the thing that made me sit back in that chair and feel the floor tilt beneath me. The worst of it was in a thread labeled simply, and I will never forget this labeled simply plan. I opened it. The emails in that thread were between Derrick, Vanessa, and a third party identified only by a Gmail address, a name I did not recognize. They spanned 4 months, and what they contained was not the record of an affair. What they contained was a documented conspiracy. Derrick's company, Booker Development Group, was carrying $2.3 million in outstanding debt, contractor liens, deferred loan payments, a private investor dispute that had been heading toward litigation for 8 months. The company was in every meaningful financial sense approaching insolvency. Derrick had known this for at least 6 months and had concealed it entirely, including from me. Their plan written out in emails that were now open on the screen in front of me was this. Derrick would file for divorce before the company's financial situation became public record. By initiating proceedings, first framing himself as the aggrieved party, and moving quickly, he intended to argue that his business assets were separate property predating the marriage, a position that would require falsifying the timeline of certain financial decisions we had made jointly. He intended to claim the house on the grounds that his name was first on the deed, despite the fact that my savings had funded the down payment. He intended to drain the joint account before the freeze motion could be filed, and to ensure that no judge would look at him with skepticism, to ensure that any financial arguments I might make would be viewed through a lens of suspicion, he had hired a private investigator to build a case that I had been unfaithful. He was going to manufacture evidence that I cheated on him. I read that line 4 times. He was going to use fabricated proof of my infidelity to discredit me before a judge to paint my financial observations as the accusations of a guilty, vindictive woman, rather than the documented analysis of a forensic accountant who had spent her career doing exactly this kind of work. There was a message from Derrick to Vanessa sent 6 weeks prior that read,
The investigator starts Monday. She has no idea. Once we have what we need, I file. No judge is going to believe a woman who cheats on her husband, especially not over a man with a clean record and a business in the community.
I printed every email in that thread on the home printer, 41 pages. I folded them and put them in the laptop bag I used for the office, which Derrick never touched. Then I sat in that chair for a long time. I want to be honest about this part because I think it matters. I did not feel rage in that moment. Not yet. What I felt was something closer to grief, deep, cold, structural grief. The kind that comes not from one betrayal, but from the recognition that the entire architecture of something you built your life around was false from a level you had not examined. It was not just that he had cheated. It was that he had looked at everything I was, my intelligence, my expertise, my professional standing, my 9 years of loyalty, and decided that all of it could be used as a weapon against me. He was not just leaving me. He was trying to destroy me on the way out. I called Tasha at 11:47 at night on the prepaid phone. She answered on the second ring. She was awake.
Tasha,
I said. My voice was completely steady.
I have everything. 41 pages. I need you to tell me how to use it.
A pause.
Are you okay?
No, I said. But I will be. Talk to me. She talked. For over an hour, she walked me through the legal architecture of what I had found, what was admissible, what required authentication, what we needed to supplement with independently obtained evidence. She explained the difference between what I knew and what I could prove. And she told me with the precision of someone who had spent 15 years in courtrooms exactly what it would take to close that gap completely. When she finished, she said,
Camille, you understand what this means. He thinks he's watching you. He thinks he already knows every move you're going to make.
I know, I said.
So let's give him something to watch.
And that was the moment. Not the morning I found the hotel receipt, not the evening I heard him on the phone in the backyard, not even the moment I read those 41 pages. That was the moment something inside me completed its shift. From wife to something else entirely. From the person who had been maneuvered into a trap to the person who was going to build a better one. Here is what Derrick Lamont Booker did not know, and what I understood with absolute clarity sitting in that home office at nearly 1 a.m. The spyware on my phone was not a liability anymore. It was an asset. He had handed me a direct line into his sense of security. He believed he could see me. He believed he was ahead. And that belief, that beautiful, arrogant, catastrophically mistaken belief, was the foundation of everything I was about to build on top of it. But here's the thing about setting a trap. You have to be patient enough to let the other person walk into it on their own. So I waited, and I let Derrick think he was winning. Let me tell you what it looks like when a woman stops surviving and starts building. It does not look dramatic. It does not look like the moment in the movies where the music swells and the character stands in the rain and makes a speech. It looks like a woman sitting at her desk on a Monday morning with a cup of coffee gone cold, a legal pad covered in neat handwriting, and a stillness about her that the people who know her well would recognize immediately as something different from calm. Tasha recognized it the moment I walked into her office that Wednesday. Her firm occupied the 9th floor of a building on Peachtree Street in Midtown. Clean lines, glass walls, the kind of space that communicated quiet authority without trying too hard. She met me at the elevator, looked at my face for approximately 2 seconds and said,
"There she is."
We sat in her conference room for 3 hours. The door was closed. Her assistant had been told to hold everything. I laid out everything I had. The hotel receipt, the business filings, the LLC registered to Vanessa Pritchard, the printed emails, Marcus's documentation of the spyware, my own timeline of behavioral changes going back 18 months. Tasha went through each piece, methodically making notes in the margins of a yellow legal pad in her small, precise handwriting. When I finished presenting, she set her pen down and looked at me across the table.
"The emails are your strongest asset. But we need them authenticated through a source that doesn't require you to explain how you accessed his account. The iCloud backup on the shared laptop, that's our foundation. He was logged into a shared household device. Georgia case law has addressed shared device access in marital discovery. We can work with this."
What about the spyware? I asked.
That is potentially his biggest exposure. Installing surveillance software on a spouse's device without consent is a violation of the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. Federal statute. That is not a divorce negotiation chip that is a separate legal liability for him that his own attorney is going to have to manage. It changes the dynamic of the entire proceeding.
She paused.
But here's what I need you to understand, Camille. We cannot move too fast. If we tip our hand before we have everything in place, he will restructure Hyde assets and we will spend the next 2 years in discovery fighting for what should already be yours. We need the independent financial audit completed. We need the asset tracing done properly. And we need...
She looked at me carefully.
We need to deal with the investigator he hired.
I nodded. I've been thinking about that.
Tell me.
I told her my idea. Tasha listened without expression for about 90 seconds. Then she leaned back in her chair and said very quietly,
Camille Renee Booker.
Is it workable? I asked.
It is absolutely workable. It is also the most controlled, deliberate thing I have ever heard anyone propose in this conference room. And I have had some wild ones.
She picked her pen back up.
Walk me through the details.
Here is what I proposed, and here is why it worked. Derrick had hired a private investigator to document what he would present as my infidelity. That investigator was following me. I had suspected it for about 10 days, noticing the same gray sedan in my periphery at irregular intervals near the office and near the gym, where I trained on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. API building an infidelity case needs photographs of the subject with a person who could plausibly be presented as a romantic interest in settings that suggest privacy and intimacy restaurants, parking structures, hotel lobbies. I was going to give him exactly that. Marcus, when I explained what I needed, was quiet for a long moment.
You want me to be the person in the photographs?
Only if you're comfortable, I said. And you need to understand exactly what it involves and why.
I understand,
he said.
Tell me what you need.
The structure was this. Marcus and I would meet at locations carefully chosen for their visibility places, where a PI with a long lens would have clear sightlines and easy access. Places where photographs taken from a public vantage point would look in isolation like a couple meeting privately. A wine bar in Virginia Highland. The lobby of a boutique hotel in Midtown. A weekend farmer's market in Decatur where we walked together and I touched his arm at least once within clear camera range. What the photographs would not show, what a long lens cannot capture from a public position, was Tasha. Tasha seated at a different table inside the wine bar. Tasha standing near the hotel concierge desk 20 feet away. Tasha browsing a produce stand 15 feet behind us at the farmer's market. A notarized statement from Tasha, a licensed attorney and officer of the court confirming her presence at each location, and the nature of each meeting would accompany every photograph Derrick's investigator had taken. Every single one. We ran this for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of carefully choreographed meetings that looked exactly like what Derrick needed them to look like from the outside, and were documented from the inside in a way that would dismantle his case completely the moment it was presented. Meanwhile, I retained a certified public accountant, independent of my firm, to avoid any conflict of interest to conduct a forensic analysis of Booker Development Group's publicly available financial records, supplemented by the documents I had legitimately accessed through the shared household accounts before Derrick changed the passwords. What that analysis produced was a detailed map of the company's financial deterioration, the $2.3 million in outstanding liabilities, 4 concealed accounts that had been moved offshore under a subsidiary name registered in Delaware, and a pattern of asset transfers that had begun approximately 7 months prior, timed with a precision I found almost professionally impressive to precede a divorce filing. He had been planning this for at least 7 months, while we were living in that house together. While I was making his coffee and attending his family dinners and being the stable, convenient woman he had settled for, then came the email to my supervisor. I found out about it through my director, Patricia, who called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon with an expression I had never seen on her face in 7 years of working together, something between anger and discomfort. "Camille," she said, "I received an email this morning from your husband. I want you to know that I did not respond to it, and I am telling you about it immediately." She handed me a printed copy. The email was 3 paragraphs long. It was written in the language of concern, careful measured the tone of a devoted husband reluctantly reaching out. It expressed worry about my mental and emotional stability. It suggested that I had been under significant personal strain that might be affecting my judgment and professional conduct. It mentioned vaguely but unmistakably that there were personal matters currently in progress that he feared could reflect on the firm's reputation if not addressed. He had tried to take my career. He had reached into the one space that was entirely mine, that had nothing to do with him, that I had built before he existed in my life, and tried to contaminate it, tried to plant a seed with my employer that would make them question my competence, my stability, my professional credibility, at the exact moment he was planning to put me on the stand in a divorce proceeding. Patricia looked at me across her desk. "Do you want to tell me what's actually going on?" "He's filing for divorce," I said, "and he is trying to discredit me before it gets to court." She held my gaze for a moment. Then she said, "I've known you for 7 years. I've watched you work. Whatever is happening in your personal life, I want you to know that nothing in that email changed a single thing about how this firm views you." I thanked her. I kept my face composed until I got back to my office. Then I closed my door, sat in my chair, and pulled out the legal pad. I wrote the email down. Date, time sender, recipient, content summary. I noted that Patricia had printed it and handed it to me, which meant it was documentable. I noted that Derrick had now made a demonstrably false statement about my professional conduct to my employer, a statement made in writing, preserved in a firm's email system, and witnessed by a director who was willing to confirm it. He had just handed me one more piece. Derrick filed for divorce on a Monday morning in late September. He came downstairs that morning in his best charcoal suit, rolling a packed suitcase. and he looked at me across the kitchen with an expression I can only describe as the face of a man who has already written the ending of a story and is simply waiting for the remaining scenes to catch up.
My attorney will be in touch,
he said. Okay, I said. I handed him a cup of coffee. He looked briefly surprised, then took it. He walked out the door. He loaded his suitcase into his car. He drove away without looking back. I stood at the kitchen window and watched until his car turned the corner. He looked so confident walking out that door, rolling his suitcase like he'd already won. He had no idea the game had been over for months. He just didn't know the score yet. Let me tell you what the 3 weeks between the divorce filing and the hearing looked like from the inside. From the outside, I imagine I looked like a woman managing a difficult situation with admirable composure. I went to work. I met my deadlines. I returned calls. I attended a firm dinner on a Thursday evening and made conversation about a stadium financing case that had been in the news, and ate the salmon and drove home and unlocked my front door and stood in the hallway of my house for about 30 seconds, just breathing. From the inside, I was running the most complex investigation of my career. The subject just happened to be my husband. Derrick's attorney, a man named Jeffrey Watts, known in Atlanta, family law circles for aggressive asset positioning and a tendency to file motions the way some people use punctuation frequently, and for emphasis, sent the formal petition on a Tuesday. The petition was thorough. It requested that Derrick retain primary interest in the Buckhead property on the grounds that his name appeared first on the deed. It requested division of joint financial assets weighted 60-40 in his favor, citing his primary contribution to the marital estate through business development activity. It requested that certain business assets be classified as separate property predating the marriage, and folded into the final section with the careful neutrality of legal language that is designed to wound without appearing to. It reserved the right to introduce evidence of conduct detrimental to the marital relationship, which is the phrase Georgia divorce attorneys use when they intend to allege infidelity. Tasha read through the petition at her kitchen table on a Wednesday evening while I sat across from her eating takeout that neither of us was particularly tasting.
He's going exactly where we expected,
she said, turning a page.
The infidelity play is in here. Watts will hold it back until the hearing for maximum impact.
She set the papers down.
Which means the photographs are coming. He's going to put them in front of the judge and let them do the work before we have a chance to respond.
Good, I said. Tasha looked at me over her reading glasses.
You're enjoying this.
I am being strategic, I said.
Those two things are not mutually exclusive,
she said, and went back to reading. The pre-hearing mediation session was scheduled for the second Thursday of October, 2 weeks before the formal proceeding. Tasha and I arrived at Jeffrey Watts's office building on Peachtree Road at 9 in the morning. The mediation suite was on the 12th floor neutral ground, theoretically. Derrick was already there when we arrived. He was seated on the far side of the conference table with Jeffrey Watts and a paralegal, and he was wearing the charcoal suit again. The same one he had worn the morning he walked out with his suitcase. I had come to think of it as his victory suit. He looked good, confident, the kind of composed that comes from believing you are holding the superior hand. Vanessa Pritchard was not present. She had no formal role in the proceedings. But I had noticed on the way in a black sedan with tinted windows idling at the curb outside the building. I did not mention this to anyone. The mediation proceeded for 2 hours and 14 minutes and resolved nothing which Tasha and I had anticipated. Jeffrey Watts presented their position on asset division with the smooth efficiency of a man who had delivered the same argument in different configurations many times before. Tasha presented our preliminary counterposition measured grounded, giving away nothing we weren't prepared to surrender. At one point, Watts mentioned with the carefully calibrated casualness of a man introducing a grenade into a conversation that his client was in possession of documentation that would be relevant to questions of credibility and conduct at the formal hearing. Derrick at this allowed himself a small smile. He looked at me directly for the first time that morning. I looked back at him with the expression I use when I am listening to a witness present testimony I already know to be false. Polite attention. Nothing more.
We look forward to reviewing any documentation your client wishes to introduce.
Tasha said in the tone of someone who genuinely means that, and then moved smoothly onto the next agenda item. When we left the building, I did not speak until we were inside Tasha's car with the doors closed. "He's ready," I said.
He thinks he is.
Tasha said. She started the engine.
How are you?
"I'm fine," I said. And I meant it. That was perhaps the strangest thing. I was fine. The grief had passed through me weeks ago and left something in its place that I can only describe as clarity. The kind of clarity you get when you have done the work, checked the math, and know that your numbers are right. The hearing was set for Tuesday, October 19th at 9 in the morning in Judge Patricia Holloway's courtroom on the 4th floor of the Fulton County Courthouse. 3 days before the hearing, Derrick sent me a text message on the compromised phone, the one he knew I carried, the one with the spyware still running quietly in the background. The message said,
"I hope you're doing okay through all of this. Whatever happens, I want it to be civil."
I read it. I understood exactly what it was: a final check on my emotional state, a confirmation that I was still in the dark, still the stable, convenient woman who would absorb this the way I had absorbed everything else. I typed back, "Thank you. I appreciate that." Sent. Set the phone down. Picked up the prepaid device and called Tasha. "He checked in," I said.
Of course he did.
She said.
You good?
"Tell me the checklist one more time." She went through it. The authenticated email prints, the independent CPA report, the notarized statements from herself and Marcus, and the 2 additional witnesses from the farmer's market and the wine bar, the documentation of the spyware provided by Marcus in a written technical report, the printed email from Derrick to my supervisor Patricia with Patricia's written confirmation attached, and the bank records showing the timing of Derrick's account access changes relative to the divorce filing. 47 individual documents in a folder that Tasha's paralegal had organized, tabbed, and numbered. And the witnesses, I asked.
Marcus is confirmed,
she said.
Patricia confirmed this afternoon. And your mother, Camille. I know you said she doesn't need to come, but she called me herself. She said, and I am quoting directly,
"I am going to be in that courtroom. Don't try to talk me out of it." I closed my eyes for a moment. My mother had driven 45 minutes to a courthouse to sit in a room and watch her daughter be defended, after Diane Booker had called her home and tried to make her doubt her own child. "Let her come," I said.
I already told her where to park,
Tasha said. The night before the hearing, I laid out my clothes. Navy blazer, the one I wore when I testified as an expert witness in financial fraud cases. White blouse. Simple pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Heels that I could stand in for hours without shifting my weight. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table in the house I had put the down payment on with my own savings, in the neighborhood I had chosen, at the table I had picked out under the light. I had hung myself because Derrick kept saying he would get to it and never did. I looked around that kitchen for a long time. Then I went to bed and slept for 7 uninterrupted hours. The best sleep I had gotten in 9 months. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror adjusting my blazer lapel, and I said out loud to my own reflection in the quiet of that house, "Nobody in that room is better at their job than me." Then I picked up my bag, walked to my car, and drove to the Fulton County Courthouse. Let's go to work. Let me tell you about the morning everything came down. The 4th floor of the Fulton County Courthouse smells like old paper and central air conditioning, and something underneath both that I can only describe as consequence. The consequence of decisions made and unmade, of things said under oath and things concealed under pressure of 9 years of marriage, reduced to a case number on a docket sheet posted outside a wooden door. We arrived at 8:45. Tasha, her paralegal Dominique, Marcus, my supervisor Patricia, and my mother Evelyn Washington, 63 years old, retired medical billing specialist. Dressed in her good burgundy coat and her church shoes, sitting in the gallery behind me with her hands folded in her lap and her jaw set in the particular way it sets when she has made a decision and nothing on this earth is going to move her from it. I turned around once before the session was called to order and looked at her. She nodded at me once. Slowly, deliberately. I turned back around. Derrick arrived at 8:52 with Jeffrey Watts and a paralegal. He was in the charcoal suit, the victory suit. The one he had worn the morning he rolled his suitcase out the door. Vanessa Pritchard sat in the gallery 3 rows back on his side, wearing a camel blazer and an expression of careful neutrality. Beside her sat 2 men I had looked up after Tasha's investigator identified them potential investors in a new development project Derrick had been courting. Men whose opinion of his character he was counting on. He had invited an audience to his victory. Behind the bench, Judge Patricia Holloway reviewed documents without looking up. Silver locked. Reading glasses perched precisely on the end of her nose. With the bearing of someone who has spent 2 decades watching people perform their worst behaviors under fluorescent lighting and stopped being surprised by any of it long ago, Jeffrey Watts opened for Derrick's side with 40 minutes of smooth argumentation, asset valuation, business classification, property acquisition timelines. He was good. He presented the financial case with the confidence of a man who believed he was standing on solid ground. Then he said, "Your Honor, at this time we would like to introduce evidence relevant to the conduct of the respondent, which we believe is material to questions of credibility and equitable distribution." He submitted the photographs, 12 prints, 8 by 10, showing me in the company of an unidentified male at 3 separate locations over a 6-week period. The wine bar in Virginia Highland, the Midtown Hotel lobby, the farmer's market in Decatur. In one photograph, I was touching his arm. In another, we were leaning toward each other across a small table. Watts laid them on the evidence table with practiced deliberateness. Derrick leaned slightly back in his chair, and there it was, the smile, small, controlled, unmistakable. The smile of a man watching the last piece of a 7-month plan slide into position. He glanced toward his investors, then looked directly at me.
You think you're so smart. You can't even keep your man.
I held his gaze with nothing on my face. Judge Holloway examined the photographs.
"The counsel," she said to Tasha. "Response."
Tasha stood. "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice carried the same even temperature it always did. No more warmth than the situation required. No less authority than it commanded. We would like to submit the respondent's reply evidence at this time.
Dominique distributed folders, tabbed, numbered. 47 documents. Tasha began with the notarized statements. Hers first as an officer of the court, confirming her physical presence at the wine bar, the hotel lobby, and the farmer's market during each photographed meeting. She named her exact location in each venue, signed before a notary public 11 days prior. Then Marcus's technical report, formal, methodical, detailing the commercial spyware installed on my personal device without consent, the installation date, the software used, and the relevant federal statute regarding electronic surveillance. Watts's expression shifted for the first time. I saw it. Then Tasha submitted the emails.
Your Honor, these communications were retrieved from a shared household device, a laptop used jointly by both parties. Georgia case precedent supports admissibility in marital proceedings. I would ask the court to turn to the thread labeled Plan, beginning on page 14.
Judge Holloway turned to page 14. The courtroom went quiet enough that I could hear the ceiling vents. She read. She turned a page. She read further, and then she stopped. She looked up from the papers. She looked at Derrick, still seated in that charcoal suit, the small controlled smile still on his face.
She read aloud. "The trap is set. She has no idea what's coming."
She set the paper down. She looked at him for a long moment. And then Judge Patricia Holloway, 22-year veteran of that bench, pressed her lips together and laughed. A single genuine involuntary sound. The laugh of a woman who has heard everything in every courtroom and has just encountered something that genuinely surprised her. Then she composed herself.
Sir, she said calmly. I think she had every idea.
The silence that followed was the most complete I have ever experienced in an enclosed space. And then I watched Derrick Lamont Booker come apart. It happened the way a structure fails when its foundation gives way. Progressively, visibly, each piece following the one before it. The color drained from his face first. Not gradually, it emptied, leaving his complexion the gray beige of old concrete. His jaw slackened. His hands folded on the table separated, and his right hand began to tremble. Not a small tremor, a visible, uncontrollable shake. He reached for his water glass and the ice shifted because his grip had failed him. He looked toward Vanessa. She was already reaching for her bag. She stood, said nothing, and walked out without a backward glance, her heels making clean, definitive sounds on the marble. The two investors followed 30 seconds later. Watts leaned toward Derrick and spoke quietly. Derrick did not respond. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. When he finally attempted words, his voice came out fractured, stripped of every note of authority it had carried for 9 years. Cracked down the middle like a beam under weight it was never built to hold. Tasha continued without missing a beat.
Your Honor, we would also draw the court's attention to Exhibit 23, an email sent by the petitioner to the respondent's employer, and Exhibit 24, the written confirmation of its receipt by the respondent's supervising director. We believe this constitutes an attempt to interfere with the respondent's professional standing in anticipation of these proceedings.
Judge Holloway moved through the folder. She called a 20-minute recess. During the recess, Watts approached Tasha near the back of the room. I sat at the respondent's table and kept my eyes forward. Then I felt a presence beside me. Derrick, still wearing the charcoal suit. But the man who had put it on that morning was gone. What stood next to me was something hollowed out, something that had been shown its own reflection and could not bear what it saw.
Camille. His voice was barely recognizable. Please, we can talk about this. I'll drop everything.
I looked up at him. My face was still. Remember when you said I was just a numbers girl who didn't understand how real business works? I said quietly. You were right about one thing. I am a numbers girl. And those numbers just told your whole story. I watched something move through his expression, something that might in a different life have resembled genuine remorse. I named it for exactly what it was. You're not sorry, Derrick. You're just sorry you got caught. He stood there a moment. Then he walked back to his table. Judge Holloway returned and delivered her preliminary rulings. Asset division would proceed according to documented contribution. The business asset classification motion was denied pending the independent audit. The spyware documentation was referred to the court's technology officer under federal statute. Then she looked at Watts with deliberate precision.
Counsel, your client would be well advised to consult with a criminal defense attorney before our next session.
Watts said nothing. As I walked out, Tasha beside me. My mother's hand briefly on my back as I passed through the gallery. I did not look behind me. There was nothing left there to see. I stepped into the hallway, and the weight I had been carrying for 9 months, every lie, every manipulated message, the fabricated evidence, the phone call in the backyard, the dinner table, the email to my supervisor, the voice saying she's someone you settle for. All of it lifted, not slowly, all at once. Like a verdict. Let me tell you about the morning after. Not the morning after the hearing, though. I will get to that. I mean the specific quality of mourning that comes when something that has been wrong for a very long time has finally been made right. Your body wakes up before your alarm and lies there in the quiet understanding that today is different from every day that preceded it. The light through the curtains looks the same. The neighborhood sounds the same. The coffee maker starts on its timer with the same soft gurgle it has always made. But something in the air is different. Lighter, as though a pressure you had normalized so completely that you stopped registering it as pressure has simply lifted. That was the morning after the hearing. I woke up at 6:23 before my alarm in the bedroom of my house in Buckhead. I lay there in the quiet for a full 10 minutes just breathing. I want to tell you what happened in the 6 months that followed, because the aftermath of something like this matters just as much as the confrontation itself, maybe more. The formal divorce settlement was finalized 7 weeks after the hearing. Tasha negotiated with the precision and tenacity that I had watched her apply to every case she had ever taken seriously, which meant every case she had ever taken. I retained the house. I retained my full share of the joint savings. What remained of it after Tasha's emergency freeze motion had stopped the drainage Derrick had initiated. The business asset question was resolved when the independent CPA audit confirmed what I had already documented. Booker Development Group's liabilities significantly exceeded its assets, meaning the company Derrick had tried to claim as separate property was worth considerably less than the debt attached to it. He did not get the house. He did not get the savings. He did not get the narrative he had spent 7 months constructing. What he got was a court referral to the Georgia State Bar's Ethics Board regarding Jeffrey Watts's role, a federal complaint filed by Marcus's attorney regarding the spyware installation, and a civil suit from 2 of his former contractor clients whose lien disputes had been sitting unresolved for 18 months. The West Side project collapsed entirely when the primary lender withdrew financing following the public record of the court proceedings. Vanessa Pritchard, I was told by Tasha, had retained her own attorney within 48 hours of walking out of that courtroom. She was distancing herself from Derrick's business arrangements, with the particular urgency of someone who has just understood the structural integrity of the building she was standing in. I did not feel satisfaction about any of this. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect a different answer. What I felt was something quieter and more complete than satisfaction. I felt the specific piece of a person who did the right thing the right way and can look at the outcome without flinching. Diane called me on a Sunday afternoon about 3 weeks after the settlement. She sounded older on the phone, smaller. The practiced warmth was gone, replaced by something that sounded honestly like uncertainty. "Camille," she said, "I owe you an apology. I want you to know that I made choices that I am not proud of. I should not have called your mother. I should not have..." A pause. "I chose my son when I should have chosen what was right, and I am sorry for that." I listened to the whole thing. I did not interrupt. When she finished, I said, "Diane, I hear you. Thank you for saying that." There was a long quiet on the line. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked. "I already am," I said. And I meant it. I thanked her for calling. I set the phone down. I did not call her back after that, and she did not call me. We had said what needed to be said. The chapter was closed. Not with hatred. I did not have room in my life for hatred, but with finality. Clean. Complete. My mother came for dinner that Saturday. I made her pot roast. The recipe she had taught me when I was 11 years old, standing on a step stool at her kitchen counter on Cascade Road. She sat at my kitchen table in her good cardigan. She told me about her garden, her church group, the neighbor down the street who had gotten a new dog. And we talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. The way you talk when you are simply grateful to be in the same room with someone you love. At one point, she looked at me across the table and said, "You handled yourself with class, baby, from beginning to end." I reached across the table and held her hand for a moment. "I learned from you," I said. She waved me off the way she always does when she does not want to cry. Then she asked for a second piece of pie, and we moved on. Tasha and I reinstated our Friday dinner tradition, the one we had let slip during the hardest months. We went back to a restaurant we had loved in the early days of our friendship, a southern spot in Inman Park with good catfish and better music. Booths deep enough that you can have a real conversation without performing it for the tables around you. She never once said "I told you so." Not once. Not even obliquely. Not even with a look. If you have someone in your life who loves you enough to be right about something important and never uses it against you, Hold on to that person with everything you have. At work, Patricia formally recommended me for a senior partner track evaluation. The case I had been building before all of this. A stadium financing fraud investigation involving 3 municipalities. It closed successfully in late November, resulting in a settlement that my firm's managing director described at our year-end meeting as one of the most technically precise outcomes in the firm's history. I did not cry at that meeting. I sat in my chair on the 14th floor in Midtown Atlanta, and I thought about a 9-year-old girl watching her mother at a kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. And I thought, she would be proud of the person you became. I painted the house in the spring. The bedroom went from the beige that Derrick had chosen to a deep, warm terracotta, the color I had been thinking about for 2 years. The living room went to a soft sage green. I rehung all the artwork. I bought a new kitchen table. Round, smaller, exactly the right size for the life I was actually living, rather than the life I had been performing. I got a dog, a 3-year-old rescue named Ruthie, a brindle mix with enormous ears and very strong opinions about where she sleeps, which is apparently the center of my bed. I did not consult anyone about this decision. It was the most satisfying executive decision I have made in recent memory. I am 38 years old. I live in a house I own, in a city I love, doing work I am genuinely good at, with people around me who tell me the truth and mean it. I wake up without dread. I make my own coffee. I sit on my own back porch on Sunday mornings. I listen to the neighborhood coming to life around me. And I feel, and I want to be precise about this word, I feel free, not healed exactly. Healing is a process and I am still in it, not unchanged. I'm not the woman I was before this, and I do not think I should want to be, but free. I look back now at every decision I made in those 9 months, and I see the through line clearly. I did not panic. I did not retaliate recklessly. I did not let my anger make my choices. I let my training and my preparation and the people who loved me do the work that needed to be done. And I trusted the process the way I have always trusted it. The way you trust math. The way you trust evidence. The way you trust the moment when the numbers finally align and the truth becomes undeniable. My name is Camille Renee Booker. I am 38 years old, and I am the most dangerous thing a liar can face. A woman who is patient, who pays attention, and who knows exactly what to do with the truth. I spent 9 years being the woman who kept the peace. Turns out the peace was never real. It was just me being quiet. I'm not quiet anymore. To anyone listening to this who is in the middle of something that feels impossible, who is being told they are imagining things, who is being isolated from the people they love, who is watching someone dismantle what they built and feeling like they have no ground left to stand on. You have more than you think. Start with what you know. Document what you see. Find your Tasha. Trust your math. And remember this. The person in the room who appears to be losing is not always the person who is losing. The best trap you can ever set for a liar is simply this. Let them keep lying. Keep building your case. And trust that the truth, when it finally lands like a verdict. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength or the strength of someone you love, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what part hit hardest. Your words matter, and they keep this community alive. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. There are more stories coming, and every single one of them is for you. You are stronger than what tried to break you. Never forget that.